Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones.
My name is Stacey Leibowitz.
Fellow Commission member Jeff French. And we've got a couple students from Greater Lawrence Technical School.
We are joined today,
Director of Compliance and Integrity at Triangle, Paralyzed Veterans of America. Members of our emergency preparedness folks, class in Lawrence.
Okay, that's okay. Yes.
My math is a little bit like 2.5.
Welcome to Ability Assistance. My name is Phyllis Jones, and I am Chair of the North Andover Commission on Ability Assistance.
welcome. My name is Stacey Leibowitz, and I'm the Commission Secretary. We are also joined behind the scenes by Jeff French, fellow Commission member, our crew from the Greater Lawrence Technical School, Carly Jones, Joshua Robos, Julian Colon, Adrian Brito, Cassie Buono, Jezebel Abrio, I apologize, and Susan Martin of North Andover CAM.
And today we're joined by Kate Burnham, Director of Special Education of Greater Lawrence Technical School.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Now, just so people are aware, we're going to use Greater Lawrence Technical School and GLTS interchangeably, and that's
great.
more for them to know than for us to know, because
Right.
we all realize that.
Right, life in acronyms.
Exactly, exactly. So let's start out. You're new at GLTS, aren't you?
I am, yes.
How long have you been a special ed educator?
I have been in the field of special education for 20 years
Okay.
as a paraprofessional first, a special education teacher, a special education team chair, special education administrator, and then a student services director for a district, and now a special education director at Greater Lawrence.
So you've really hit all of those educational levels along
have,
the way.
yeah.
You really know it.
Yeah.
Why did you choose special ed?
So I went for undergrad for elementary education.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to do always, my whole entire life. I ended up taking a little bit of time off doing something different after college because I didn't feel like I was quite ready, and then ended up getting a paraprofessional job at alternative high school, and I never looked back. I walked in and I just knew that was where I wanted to be and the type of population I wanted to work with and support.
That's fantastic. That's
I was
fantastic.
really lucky.
So for those of folks out there, what is GLTS? Who does it serve?
So it serves 4 communities. It serves the city of Lawrence, the city of Methuen, the town of Andover, and the town of North Andover.
So it's a community school.
It is a community school.
And where is it located?
It's located in Andover, 57 River Road.
Right off 495.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, right
Or
on
93.
93.
Yeah,
93. Yep.
93.
Super easy to get to.
Yes. What does special education look like for students at GLTS?
So what special education looks like at GLTS looks pretty much like it does at any other comprehensive high school, right? So what our responsibilities are is to provide the students with the services that they require as outlined in their IEP, so individual education plan, to the best of our ability at Greater Lawrence. So any services that a student requires, any modifications, any accommodations that they require as identified by a team, which includes, right, a special education teacher, a regular education teacher, the parents, the student in the year they turn 14, a required member of the team, as well as a special education team chairperson, someone who can allocate, who has the right and responsibility to allocate services. So that team determines what that student requires to receive their education in what's called the least restrictive environment. So there's levels of services. There's services in the special education setting, which is special education students together with a special education teacher in a small group. There's inclusion setting, which is typically a special education teacher or a paraprofessional with a regular education teacher, and it's a combination of special education and regular education students in the same setting. And then there's a consultation setting, right, which means that there are service providers who maybe are required to consult to either the regular education teacher, the special education teacher, other service providers, or parents.
So
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what some of those special services or specific services like the consulting services might look like depending on an individual's needs?
Absolutely. So some students may continue to require special education services in the area of speech and language in high school. And so we have speech and language therapists who come in as contracted workers with us. We have a BCBA, so that's a board certified behavior analyst who consults to our staff based on kids who may require some support around adapting and changing behaviors so they can access school. If a student needed an occupational therapist or a physical therapist, we would contract for that, and they may work directly with a student or they may consult, so how the regular ed or special ed teacher on how an environment can be adapted or modified to support a student in the classroom.
Now, you had mentioned speech and language pathology.
Yep.
Years ago, it was if a student had a second language and we were trying to do English immersion, they would put on a IEP, and that was the way it was done. But that's not the way it's done anymore, just so parents are aware, correct?
So there are students who both, right, have special education services and what are called L services, English learners. English learning students, we have a very robust English language program at our school, which is regular education service. There are some students who require both, and they have been typically evaluated in their primary language, which is not English, in order to determine whether they have a disability in learning or whether they just require more support in developing their English language skills.
Now also, and parents might find this interesting, my child goes to GLTS, so it kind of helps a little bit, so that parents are aware. There are very formal rules for all of the students to follow in terms of how to move around the building, wearing uniforms.
Yes.
Could you so parents are aware of that, can you go into it a little bit?
So clarify for me so each career tech area has a uniform.
Exactly.
They're required to wear
Exactly.
in school during their shop week.
Yep.
And then they have to be in Greater Lawrence, like Reggie wear during their
Exactly, yep.
academic week. Freshmen they don't have a shop yet, right? So they're exploring the shop areas to determine what shop they're going to continue on with through their time at Greater Lawrence, and they typically wear Reggie wear. They have almost all of the freshmen you'll see in a black sweatshirt with orange GLTS on the side, or a polo type shirt or a t-shirt that they're required.
Basically.
Yep.
Basically,
And they need to have work boots,
Yep.
right? So there's safety regulations, and that's a little piece of that of important thing to recognize. That safety piece is really to that uniform.
Which is great because it kind of gives them that sense of career to begin with, which is really nice.
Designed some
The
pretty cool
sense of-
logos for their shops.
That's great.
Yes, in fact, the logo you can see behind us was designed, edited, but he did a lot of hard work by one of the graduating students. He's now a college student. I don't know exactly where he is, but he graduated GLTS last year from graphics communications, and he designed or edited that for us in a way that we wanted to bring it up to date a little bit.
Great opportunity
And
for
he
him.
did a fantastic job.
Nice.
So you'd mentioned inclusion settings.
Sure, yeah.
Can you go a little bit?
So we have a combination of special education settings where kids receive their academics, right? So those are very small group, probably 8 kids, and that's taught by a special education teacher. We have that for English, math, science. We're really moving towards full inclusion in history, so that is an inclusion setting at this point. The inclusion piece is a regular standard high school classroom for your academic class, where you have the content is taught by a regular education certified teacher, right, in your content area, which would be, let's say, math.
Yep.
And then there's a special education teacher who supports that classroom, and they co-teach together. So they are providing content together, but you have a content specialist, because all research shows, right, your highest level of achievement comes from a content specialist teacher, and then any modifications or accommodations or that happen even on the fly, right, where you recognize a kid might not understand what's happening, that special education teacher can support the students who require that extra support in the classroom.
And that's inclusion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So with that in mind, you had mentioned something earlier about the least restrictive environment, so I'm assuming inclusion kind of does play into that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what the least restrictive environment looks like and how that pertains to the shops?
So we do have 3 special education teachers that support our career tech ed areas, which is something that was really attractive and interesting to me about coming to Greater Lawrence Technical School, because we're recognizing that there are students that need support in academics, but also in their career tech ed areas. The goal is for them to move from a more restrictive to a least restrictive environment as they move through school, because they're going out into the work world where these same supports will not exist.
And you'll get the same thing at a traditional college prep high school anyway.
Yes, exactly the same. And then as you go on to college, while there is supports in colleges, they don't mirror or have the same requirements that public education does. So the goal is to meet, right, yearly and regularly as a team to determine how they move from a more to a least restrictive environment. So for those IEP parents out there, right, we have the C grid, which is the most restrictive, the B grid, which is less restrictive, and then the A grid, which is the consultation piece. So there is, depending on what the team determines, right, and it is always a team decision at that meeting, there are available supports, for those students in the vocational settings. So they have their related section, which is that more academic piece of the shop, learning that part of it, where they have support from a special education teacher, but they also will be in a shop in case something may need to be modified depending on safety.
Right. Now, once a child chooses a shop, I know they call them CTEs
Right.
now,
Career
but
tech ed areas.
yes, but for old folks
Yeah,
like
no,
me,
shop
Yep.
wants to.
once a student chooses a shop, will the shop teacher or somebody from the shop department be folded into the IEP planning as things progress every year?
Right, so they can be a member of the team for sure. You know, regulations state that one regular ed teacher is required at all team meetings. Parents are more than welcome to request that one attend. And we do have shop teachers and academic teachers come through. And that is all just dependent on sort of where the students' needs are and the conversation that happen regarding what that student needs as support. Each student is assigned a liaison, so I think I should say that, a special education liaison. So every kid has kind of that go-to person at school that can help be that link between the special education services and the academic side and also the career tech ed side. So if a student is struggling in a certain area, whether that's an academic class or whether that's in their shop, that there is a special education liaison who's kind of that kid expert, that special ed kid expert that can help support and strategize with either one of those classroom teachers. I encourage that to be a triangle, right, with the kid involved first, because we're trying to help them learn to advocate for themselves. And so not just have a grown-up solve the problem for them, but to help them solve the problem. So as they move forward, they're developing the skills necessary to communicate appropriately to get their needs met and to also really understand their disability.
So it's more about person-centered planning, which works right through into adulthood when people move into, say, ISPs after age 22.
Yes.
And I guess, again, kind of looking at that least restrictive, you have these pieces in place to support the individuals. How do we bridge, because obviously, we were talking a little bit before the show about, say, you're supporting somebody who may be hearing impaired and you have somebody there who has sign language capability and they're at the shop, or say it's an auto mechanic type of thing. you know, in the real world, you're not going to have somebody standing next to you. I know from my experience working in the adult disability field where you have job coaches and the idea is to fade eventually. What is that bridge as somebody who's like a senior and you're dealing with that least restrictive, or even beforehand, to try to fade, or do you do that as part of the components to build a more realistic setup for
That's
them?
absolutely my vision and goal, right, is that we support kids as much as they require to access the curriculum, not what they would benefit from, because you're exactly right. So as they move forward, the same level of support is not required. You won't see that through adult services. You won't see that in college or in the workplace. So it really is very individualized, and some kids need a lot of support right up until the end. And it's also conversations about planning with them and for them in where they're going to be the most successful when they leave us, right? Like I will, even back to teaching, I would say, I'm not going with you when you leave, you know.
But every teacher's going to say
Right,
that to
exactly.
every kid.
I'm not going with you, so we've got to figure out how you can
Keep
do
reinforcing that
this on
message.
your own. And they're just important conversations to
Right.
have with the kids and the families, that you're here to support, but not further enable, right? So and it can be a very tricky balance, and it can be really empowering conversations. And I think that's part of working with students with disabilities, is really teaching them how to empower themselves, and letting the parents know that we're here to support, but also empower.
How does it work with the parents? Because I know we have dealt, again, in my experience sometimes, with parents who are very much, they're supportive, but maybe a little too involved, or, you know, what's that balance that you strike with the parents?
I believe that always comes from a good place.
Yes.
Right?
Oh, I agree.
So I think
I agree.
that always comes, for the parents, that always comes from such a great place. And it's hard. It's really hard to know that your kid is going to have a hard time, whether that's your typical developing kid or a student with a disability. And so that's really individual, and that has a lot of family dynamics that play into it. I think building trusting relationships is the most important thing you can do from the beginning. It doesn't mean that you always agree, but being respectful and helping everyone learn, right? So that parent knows their kid better than anybody else. So we have a lot to learn from that parent, for sure. And they have a lot to learn about our school and preparing kids as they get older, what that means. And can be really scary for parents. Any parent, right? Any parent.
Yeah, my kid's going to be graduating from high school next year, and
There's a whole bunch of feelings,
Yes.
right, about that. And so I just think making sure that you have a respectful approach in relationship, knowing that the goal is to encourage them to be as independent as possible.
Now, where the tech schools have more in terms of real life study than the traditional high schools, and I don't want to put you on the spot here, what are all the shops that are offered?
I would do everyone a big disservice if I listed them. We have a variety of shops, which I really like. I think we have the traditional shops that you would see. We have cosmetology, we have culinary, we have auto, we have electrical, plumbing, HVAC. We have graphics, we have business tech. I might be doing better than I thought.
Yes,
We
you
have
are.
STEAM, we have horticulture,
I think you
and
hit all of them.
no, we have dental assisting, we have health careers.
That's right.
So there is a real, I know I'm forgetting some, so I apologize for those that I forgot, but a real wide variety of opportunities for students to be able to access.
And then going into that, one of the reasons why we wanted you on the show, and one of the things that our commission tries to strive for, is we like to show people that you can't say, well, I can't just because. And so where you do have different types of shops, you have shops that are suited for people of different abilities.
Absolutely.
So now the question becomes, okay, safety comes first, especially if you're dealing with handheld tools or things of that nature. But if a student has a certain disability, you can help them choose a shop that you can provide services? How does that work?
So I think it's a little bit, let's flip that a little bit,
Okay.
right? So we figure out what a student requires to access, and the whole shop selection process is pretty robust and complicated. So so kids have their first 3, and it's based on this whole formula of what happened in exploratory, on where they get placed. So once they're placed, what our obligation is to provide them the services they require to access that. At times, you could run into a safety issue, and then that may have to be a conversation, and then what may happen or need to be modified, and talking about what that means for them moving forward, and what the school can do to support to the best of our ability, under our requirements, and what the student, is this really what makes sense for them going forward, and then talking about what that means for future planning, for career and college readiness and all of that part, because part of our obligation is transition planning as students with disabilities. So we've really got to work and look and make sure we are fulfilling our obligation for transition planning for when they leave us.
Now, my question going to that is, and this is the lawyer in me coming out, usually when you, in the real world, when you go and apply for a position, part of the application process after you've been hired is they'll ask you, do you need any accommodations in order to perform the job? Yep. So if, for example, a child who is deaf or hard of hearing goes through culinary, let's say, okay, and they learned that a special light by the equipment gives them what they need to know in terms of, sometimes a blender, you go by what the sound is. Yes. Well, if you can't hear the sound, maybe there's a special light connection that can be put next to the blender so that the child, or then a working chef, can see it. It would actually help them going forward, because then they'd be able to know what sort of accommodations they might need in the workforce. Isn't that something?
So we definitely look at that realistically. All the time for kids, right? So fire alarms now don't just make sound, they have the flashing lights, right? So those also need to exist in bathrooms, for example, right? They can't just be in the hallways, because if someone's in the bathroom when this happens. So there is absolutely looking at providing what they require to access and still be safe.
And then that provides them the knowledge that they need in the future, which helps with transition planning. Right, Stacey?
Which is actually another good question. So obviously, I think everything that you're doing kind of leads up to that transition planning, but how does that work as far as specific transition planning for them, for the students to move on into the adult capacity, as far as other programming, maybe connecting with services like the Department of Developmental Services, working with their parents to plan those next steps? Because many times we've dealt with parents who are like deer in the headlights, they don't know. So as a school, what is your planning process with
that?
them?
Is this very much the same as a comprehensive high school, right? So we have MRC who comes in and meets with our kids. We also do, which I don't know a lot about, and I'm learning about, American training, which our kids, before they we make the MRC referral. So any student on an IEP, no matter what the disability, is eligible for an MRC referral. And there are other students who may require what's called a Chapter 688 referral, which would be a higher level of need of DDS, right, Department of Developmental Services. There's also like we're talking, right, go with the deaf and hard of hearing piece, right? There's a special kind of wing of that focuses on kids with that, but there's also the Department of Mental Health. There's Department, DPH, there's all of these different referral agencies that you can refer to if a student meets that criteria. And so that's done typically in their junior year. And then they start attending, that service provider from that adult starts attending the IEP meetings in that year as they're transitioning towards graduation. So they are part of what we do in our school setting to most appropriately plan for what they need after.
Now, people might be asking, we're getting real world skills. We're getting culinary, we're getting automotive, we're getting cosmetology. I mean, these are programs that people will pay money to participate in. What do I pay for my kid to go to GLTS?
So you don't, it's like it's the same as going to your public high school. You have the same entitlement for these services as if you attended your public high school. So there's no charge.
And
It's not a tuition.
there are special costs associated with any high school. Like I know the kids have to rent their Chromebooks, for example, over the course of the 4-year period. But just to attend, just to be in a particular shop, it's as if they were going to North Andover High from that perspective.
Absolutely.
And also North Andover High or North Andover to GLTS is a little bit of a ways from walking, so people should know that they're provided the
Transportation. Yes.
and
Regular yellow school bus.
Yep, and you feed everybody breakfast and lunch.
Feed everybody. There's food all the time.
Upside of
Always a
being
good thing.
Yeah.
upside.
Yes, for sure.
So, and we've been jumping around so much. You don't have any substantially separate programming.
Not have substantially separate
What does
programming.
that mean?
So we don't have, right, so some high schools may have a substantially separate program for social emotional programming. They may have substantially separate program for students who have severe intellectual impairments. Some really big high schools may have substantially separate program with students who have some very severe health, a combination of health disability with intellectual impairment. We don't offer substantially separate programming. It doesn't exist at GLTS.
So what do you do to accommodate if a student falls into one of those categories?
We wouldn't be able to duplicate
Okay.
what they are offered in their sending district, so they would attend their sending district.
Okay. So there are obviously limitations, just like there are limitations for anybody. There becomes a safety limitation as well for students. But it sounds as though it really needs to be very far to the end of the spectrum to.
It's a very inclusive, I would say it's a very inclusive school with a wide variety of students with disabilities that are supported. There we have, really high, kids with sort of that, their least restrictive environment is, full inclusion, right? And we have other students that really require that special education, their academics in that special education setting, and they require support in the voc area as well. And there's all combinations of that, right? So that support exists at Greater Lawrence Technical School. We have school adjustment counselors that support kids that require counseling. Like I said, we have speech and language therapists that are there to work with kids, provide evaluations, all of that. We have a school psychologist, and this is just in the special ed side of it. We've got a whole bunch of other stuff going on the regular ed side, which is great. We have special education teachers on both the academic side and the vocational side as well.
And for the special education students, do they attend till 22, just like other schools, or is it only through 18?
So typically, my understanding, and like I said, I'm new and I'm still learning, is our students, currently we don't have anyone that appears to require services till 22. I think that's sort of figured out as they go through school, what they require, and then the conversation happens at the team meeting that determines that as they move through, and then the team determines what they require moving forward.
Now, there is a stigma. We were talking about that we won't date each other, but we're all roughly the same generation. And there is a stigma attached to going to tech schools. What can you say about breaking the stigma? I mean, not every kid will fall into every category, but I can tell you from my personal experience, my daughter's National Honor Society. So can these kids still go on to college if they choose? And
I think that folk schools have been sort of re-imaging themselves and recreating themselves in the past, over probably the past 5 years. It was part of my excitement about coming and being part of vocational technical education as it continues to move forward. Our kids are going to college like everybody else. our kids are passing the MCAS like everybody else. There's very robust academics. I have learned so much and already feel so proud of what our kids are doing, and the opportunities that they have to explore a career before you're paying all that big giant tuition, right? So there are kids that do their career tech ed area, and that's not what they go on to college for, because they've chosen to do something else. There's some that move and go to, do the further education to support their career tech ed area, like electrician, right? They may be an apprentice and then go on and do 2 more years of school to get their journeymans. And those are offered at night at Greater Lawrence or other places. There's opportunities once graduated. Greater Lawrence offers night school components, right? That's different. So there's a whole bunch of different stuff. There's kids that may go on to business school and then have a contracting company, right? Because they love both. So they have this opportunity to really understand the hands-on aspect of the career and then develop their skills to advance it to further.
It really gives them, all students, the opportunity to kind of explore their own mind. How many kids did we grow up with where we went into college and, what was your major? Undecided.
Yeah, well, it was like a set path. You're either like college prep or you're
Yeah.
doing the VOTEC thing. And, unfortunately, there was the stigma. Honestly, listening to this, I wish I had this as an option, because you can do that exploration when you're younger and try to figure things out, which is great for anybody, regardless of whether you're in a tech school or not. So to me, it kind of turns that stigma up on its ear, so to speak.
It does. It's doing a really nice job of kind of marrying the two.
Yes.
And we have lots of room for growth. I hope we continue to grow and explore new opportunities that this whole vocational career tech ed world offers. I'm really, really excited to be part of it, and I'm learning a lot still. So I probably don't have all of the answers,
Yes.
but I'm really excited to be a part of it, and I love seeing what the kids are doing. We've had students come back this year and speak to us about some of their successes, and that's really, really been nice.
And one of the things that I personally love that I can tell you if you didn't know, and all of our regular viewers and maybe even new viewers, we do this show once a month. And rain, snow, sleet, or hail, we're here once a month, 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday, and all of our crew comes from GLTS. And these kids are getting up on a Saturday morning to volunteer their time to work cameras and soundboards and teleprompters and help set up the set. And, that's the type of...
So they're developing their skills in the real world, right? As well as then having them reinforced at school. And in my opinion, giving back to community, which is really another huge part of what GLTS is really good at, is that community connection piece. No matter what community of the 4 they come from.
Exactly, and they're able to put it on their resumes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So for college or whatever the next step.
And I
right?
had one of our kids come back to me and say, "Can I use you as a reference?"
That's nice.
So and of course I was happy to.
Of course you were.
The young man gave us, out of a 8-month period, 6 months. So, that deserves a recommendation in my book.
Exactly.
Well, Kate, I'd like to thank you for coming on
Thank you for asking me.
and doing this program, because we wanted to break 2 stigmas. We wanted to break one stigma that, yes, you may have some sort of an impairment, whether it be cognitive or physical, and that is not a reason why you can't look into to see whether or not the local tech school.
Absolutely.
And also the other is to break the stigma and the preconceived notion that about what a tech school is, what a tech school offers, and who they service.
I hope I did it justice
No,
and
you did
understanding.
definitely.
I really enjoyed being here with you both today.
Well,
Thank
we
you.
enjoyed
Thank
having
you.
you.
Yes,
Thank
we
you so
did.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Waiting for the teleprompter a little bit. So Kate, again, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today about the services offered to students at Greater Lawrence Technical School. Remember, you can find us on Facebook at Commission on Disability Issues. That's Commission on Disability Issues with an S. You can also watch us on demand on North Andover CAM's YouTube channel. And you can listen to this program as a podcast on Podbean. And the program is at Ability Assistance North Andover, MA. We'd also like to thank our crew. Jeff French, our fellow commission member, and our crew from Greater Lawrence Technical School, Carly Jones, Joshua Robles, Julian Colon, Adrian Brito, Cassie Bonanno, Jezebel Arbru, and Susan Martin of North Andover CAM. And from everyone here at the commission and our entire happy crew, happy, healthy, happy holidays until next month and next year on Ability Assistance.